The Last Blade series is a curious case. It's considered as one of the finest SNK fighting games, yet many hardly heard or know very little about it. I guess the players' all attention went to the other more famous weapon-based franchise, Samurai Shodown, which The Last Blade is considered as its spiritual successor, despite being totally different series from each other. In addition, having only 2 iterations didn't help shedding enough light on the series either. Set in the Bakumatsu era, this surprisingly deep and rich story of the Last Blade games take place during real-life history events with a mix of Chinese mythology and folklore. The developers also include homage to many famous manga and anime, most notably Rurouni Kenshin and Dragon Ball Z. While there is no proof that this series shares the same universe as some shows, it certainly has unexpected connections with other famous SNK IPs, as we'll see in this video. But before that, as always, if you like this content, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe and also click that bell icon if you want to be notified with every new video posted. The story of The Last Blade is the story of 2 worlds, one where death and evil is the norm, known as the Makai, and the other, a much more peaceful realm where humans live, called Earth. Since the dawn of time, a portal known as Hades' Gate separated the 2 worlds, and it was guarded throughout the countless ages by its 4 mythical guardians: the vermilion bird Suzaku, the white tiger Byaku, the black tortoise Genbu, and the blue dragon Seryu. These 4 sacred beings lived by possessing the bodies of humans who they judged worthy of their powers. Some of these people were aware of the mythical beings within them and lived in harmony with their spirits, like Okina, who thanks to the power of the black tortoise was granted an exceptionally long life, but others were just too afraid of using their potential. The year is 1863. Japan was experiencing a decisive change in its history. The time of its isolationist foreign policy was coming to an end, and the country started to open and accept the Western culture in a period known as the Bakumatsu. Of course, this change caused conflict between many factions. Some were in favor of this new era, others were totally against it, and there were those who just benefited from the chaos to achieve their own goals and agendas, adding even more turmoil and disorder. One man was silently watching all that, filled with hatred and disgust toward men as he contemplated their greed and thirst for power. This man was Shinosuke Kagami and was one of the aforementioned 4 guardians of Hell's Gate, the avatar of Suzaku. He always wondered why he should protect these lowly inferior humans from the Makai. He was also offended by their indifference to the existence of the 4 guardians. Kagami's impatience reached the point of no return with the arrival of the Bakumatsu era. He deemed humans to be no longer worthy of protection, and since it was a time of opening to others, he was like, why don't I just open the gates of hell on you all? He started by imprisoning one of his brethren, the avatar of Byaku, Shigen, as he considered him a threat to the success of his plan. For the next few years, Kagami tirelessly worked on unsealing the gate of Hades until his efforts eventually paid off, and as a last step, he used the power of the Makai to resurrect a legendary samurai who had died a long time ago, named Musashi. His intent was to make him his bodyguard and to see how a warrior from an ancient time would act in this new era. The opening of Hell's Gate didn't go unnoticed, of course. The first to be alarmed by this event was Okina, the avatar of Genbu, who learned about the treason of Kagami and the imprisonment of Shigen. He managed to free the latter at last, but due to the long years of captivity, Shigen became mad and went berserk. He could only think of one thing: reach Kagami and smash his head. But he wasn't the only one seeking to destroy Kagami. Another friend of Okina set off in a similar quest. It was the famous swordsman Gaisei. Prior to these events, Gaisei took under his wing 3 orphans. The first was Moria, whose parents were unknown. The second was a foreign young girl named Yuki, who lost her family in a shipwreck. And the third, Kaede, who was actually the avatar of Seryu, the blue dragon. But at that time, he probably wasn't even aware of that, or he was afraid of using its powers out of fear of losing himself to Seryu. All 3 kids were trained by the master swordsman and grew up to become great warriors. Back to the present events. When he learned about the opening of the Gate of Hades, Gaisei challenged Kagami in an attempt of stopping him. Unfortunately, the latter proved to be a superior warrior and killed Gaisei. Later on, Kaede and Yuki found the corpse of their master, but most shockingly, Moriya was standing next to him. Kaede deduced that it was Moriya who killed their foster father. Enraged, he charged at his brother. Moriya, however, chose to avoid the confrontation and ran away without a single word. In actuality, Moriya had a very good reason to stay silent. Just before he passed away, Gaisei begged Moriya to not go after his killer, as he didn't want him or his other two disciples to get killed too. Had Moriya specified that he wasn't the murderer, Kaede and Yuki would certainly go look for the real culprit, which goes against Gaisei's last wish. And so, Moriya decided to take the blame in silence and flee, but he was also adamant in fighting Kagami and avenging his master alone. As for Kaede and Yuki, they split up in search for Moriya, believing that he was the killer. At some point, Kaede visited Okina, who trained him for some time and mentored him about controlling the powers of the sacred beast within him. 5 years after the death of Gaisei, Kaede set off to Hades' Gate to seal it and avenge the death of his master on the way. Kaede was far from being the only man who was seeking the gate of hell. Other figures were after that same goal. The police-like faction, known as the Shinsengumi, sent two of their best swordsmen, Keishiro Washizuka and Kojiro Sanada, to gather intel about this phenomena. In addition, they had the order of eliminating a demented man called Shikyo. Shikyo was a former officer in the Shinsengumi, but was fired from the force due to his excessive violence and deranged nature. Now he was roaming freely as a serial killer, taking advantage of the chaos of the Bakumatsu. Zantetsu, a man known as the Last Ninja, was seeking to put an end to Hades' Gate himself, as that would show the entire world the power of his clan and that ninjas are the perfect warriors, in a time where they were considered no longer needed. The Ichijo family, a clan of oracles, was concerned when one of the members of the family fell to a mysterious sickness. The patriarch sent his youngest daughter, Akari, to the gate with a mission, suspecting that the illness of his older daughter is caused by this cursed portal. Akari was accompanied in her mission with her adoptive brother, the giant with the heart of gold, Juzo. One martial artist, Gekka, even came from abroad to vanquish evil when he learned about the opening of Hades' Gate. Meanwhile, Yuki learned about the innocence of Moriya and decided to confront him with the truth. Even though she didn't get any answer from him, she told Kaede anyway, who went to face his older foster brother. Only after having a duel and winning it, that Moriya finally confirmed what Yuki told him. He was in fact innocent, and the real culprit was Kagami. He tried to dissuade Kaede from fighting the fearsome man, but it was in vain. However, before he could reach his target, Kaede was stopped by the undead samurai Musashi, who wasn't going to let anyone get close to his master, and a fearsome battle began. Coming out victorious from the showdown, Kaede continued his way while Musashi acknowledged the strength of the young swordsman before his body disintegrated for good. At last, Kaede found Kagami's sinister castle near the Hades Gate and without hesitation rushed to challenge him. Dressed in a Western fashion, Kagami welcomed the young man by mocking his motivations. After his speech about the silliness of human feelings, the combat finally started. Kaede managed to avoid Kagami's strikes while delivering some painful blows on his own that put his opponent on his knees. However, the second round proved to be much tougher when the evil man used his trump card and awakened the power of Suzaku. That axe alone was enough to destroy the walls around them. But Kaede was no ordinary fighter either. After hesitating his entire life, he decided to use the strength of Seiryu and transformed into awakened Kaede. Under this form, he gained the control of the lightning element, an overall boost in strength and speed, in addition of a change in his personality, becoming more sarcastic and confident. With his newly acquired powers, the new Kaede delivered the death blow to his enemy, put an end to his plans, and avenged his master. Kagami was absorbed by the hellish gate as it began to shut, where an eternity of torment awaited him on the other side. Not far from where the last battle took place, another duel was raging between Shikyo and Kojiro. The latter won the fight and managed to trap his opponent in the portal as it closed, but unfortunately he suffered fatal injuries from their combat and died soon after. Although he failed in completing his objective, Zantetsu returned to his village with a new goal. He was determined of preserving the way of the ninja and was going to make sure that his grandsons will continue the legacy of the Kisaragi fighting style after him. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because Zantetsu is the ancestor of Art of Fighting and KOF character Eiji Kisaragi. As for Kaede, after his victory, he made peace with his adoptive brother and sister, but most importantly, embraced his new persona and the great power that came with it, and because he liked his new blonde hair. With that, the crisis of the Hades Gate came to a close, and everyone lived happily ever after for the long 6 months that followed. Because it stayed opened for a long time before, the Gate of Hades couldn't remain closed and ended up opening again. This time, not even the power of the sacred beast was enough to reseal it. As Okina explained to Kaede, an ancient ritual had to be performed which required the sacrifice of a specific figure known as the Sealing Maiden. However, they didn't have the time to look for the said maiden, as a new threat arose from the depth of hell. An unknown force brought back Gaisei as an enraged undead warrior. Kuryu, that was his new name, somehow obtained the powers of all 4 sacred beasts combined, gaining the control of their elements, which made him an unstoppable foe. He went in a mad killing spree, causing havoc and destruction wherever he went. Kaede and Yuki set off to stop him, and so did Moria, who rushed at their help as soon as he knew about the reopening of the portal. As that wasn't enough, another evil spirit escaped from Hades' Gate. It possessed the body of an infant and made him grow up to adulthood in no time. Setsuna was his name and presented himself as the messenger from afar. His objective, aside from killing as much humans as possible, was to find the Sealing Maiden and kill her before she could perform the rite. He was very aware of the danger she presented to him and to his kind, and he certainly didn't want to be sent back to hell again. At some point, he realized that he needed a weapon worthy of his ego. He visited a renowned swordsmith and used a spell on him that made him work on a katana for 80 days without eating or sleeping. Eventually, the swordsmith finished his task but died soon after due to exhaustion. The daughter of the poor man, Hibiki, found out that her father's death was no accident. Someone stole his life and she was determined to make them pay. Just as she left her home, a friend of her father, Amano, came for a visit and learned what happened. He felt that it was his responsibility to look after Hibiki and immediately tried to catch up with her. The reopening of the Hell's Gate brought another wicked being to the living world. The cruel Shikyo was resurrected as the undead Mukuro and without wasting time resumed his bloodshedding routine. When she learned about the death of her brother, Kaori, the young sister of Kojiro, decided to disguise herself as him and joined the Shinsengumi to fill the void that her brother left. One day, their base was set on fire by an unknown individual. After doing some investigation, Kaori and Washizuka discovered that the perpetrator was in fact Mukuro. Shocked that the fiend was still alive, they immediately began their chase for him. The last to return from hell was none other than Shinnosuke Kagami himself, the very same man that started all this mess. But this time he was reincarnated to atone for his past misdeeds as one of the guardians of the gate. he joined his old friends Okina and Shigen, who decided to give him a second chance, and they all set sail to seal the gate of Hades as their duties commanded them to. Kaori ended up finding Mukuro, who confused the young woman with her late brother. A fierce battle erupted between the two, Mukuro thinking his opponent to be the man who trapped him in the Makai, and Kaori finally had the chance to meet her brother's killer. At the end, victory went to her, and Mukuro was sent again to Hell, the only place where he'll always be welcomed. In the meantime, Hibiki was caught up by Amano, who convinced her to return back with him, even before she was able to meet her father's killer, which is certainly for the best. As she approached the gate of Hades, Yuki's path was blocked by Setsuna. She immediately recognized him as the messenger from afar, but if he was there for her, that only meant one thing. Yuki was actually the Sealing Maiden. In truth, she knew that since the day when the gate opened and her necklace started glowing, but didn't want to believe it. For who wants to be used as a sacrifice? Even so, the fate of the war depended on her, and she couldn't afford to be selfish. She had to complete the sealing rite, even if the price was her life. But first, she must survive the deadly encounter with the ruthless Setsuna. Yuki had to use all the strength she had and the techniques she learned from her master to vanquish her bloodthirsty enemy. It was an arduous task, but Yuki managed to complete it nonetheless, and Setsuna was no more. Then she proceeded to fulfill her destiny. Kaede found his former master unrecognizable. Gaisei, or Koryu as he called himself, was completely under control of evil. Kaede tried to reason with him, but it was in vain. He had to use force against his father figure to resolve this matter. Truthful to his status as an SNK boss, Koryu was insanely strong, a walking nightmare for those who opposed him. But thanks to some miracle, Kaede managed to exploit an opening in his opponent's defense and launched his strongest attack that sent Koryu flying across the arena. He was finally defeated. Only at that moment that Gaisei recovered his memories. He complimented Kaede for managing to control Seiryu effectively and expressed how happy he was seeing his students becoming this strong. His only regret was that he wouldn't be able to see them grow up into adulthood. Gaisei urged Kaede and the other three guardians who arrived at that moment to seal him while he was still weakened. They started to perform the ritual when Yuki appeared in the distance as the Sealing Maiden to finish it and close the hellish gate, but not before saying goodbye to her two siblings. Realizing that Yuki was the maiden shocked Kaede greatly, but it was too late to do anything. Yuki was no more. The sealing of the gate created an immense explosion which almost killed Kotetsu, Shigen's daughter, if he didn't step in and shielded her with his body, adding an extra sacrifice for that crisis to finally end. Even when it was over and everything went back to normal, Kaede couldn't feel any joy or sense of accomplishment. The loss of Yuki was just too much for him. That being said, some believe that the young woman was resurrected later and granted an incredibly long lifespan. She was even seen wandering in the streets and watching others fight from the shadows. As for if these claims were true, I guess no one can tell for sure. That was The Last Blade story explained. I have to say, I had a lot of fun playing these two games when capturing footage. I forgot how enjoyable they are, but most importantly, how beautiful their presentation is. The characters look gorgeous, and the stages are so detailed and lively. Visually, the Last Blade games are among the best looking 2D fighters of the late 90s. The gameplay is also super enjoyable, and it's a real shame that there is no third episode. If you never played these games, do yourself a favor and try them out. You won't regret it. In the end, I'd like to thank my patrons for their generous support. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and why not consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.